For decades, a shadow hung over El Salvador, a shadow cast not by war alone but by a systematic campaign of disappearance and state-sponsored murder. These paramilitary units, known as Escuadrones de la Muerte, were the primary instrument of terror during one of the Cold War's most brutal conflicts. Of the 75,000 lives lost during the Salvadoran Civil War, the United Nations concluded that 85% were victims of the state and its allied squads. The roots of this violence reach back to 1932, when a peasant uprising was met with a massacre that left 30,000 dead. This matanza established a culture of military dominance and the belief that subversion must be met with total annihilation. In the 1960s, General Jose Alberto Medrano with US backing founded Orden, a massive rural spy network. Orden became the eyes and ears of the military, recruiting tens of thousands of peasants to identify and inform on their own neighbors. Alongside Orden was ANSISOL, the elite intelligence agency that compiled lists of labor leaders, students, and priests to be targeted. These structures were built under the guidance of US advisors, intended to professionalize security forces against the threat of communism. By the 1970s, election fraud and deepening poverty turned the country into a pressure cooker. Dissent was met with growing paramilitary force. Shadowy groups like the Union of White Warriors and Mano Blanca emerged, often staffed by off-duty members of the National Guard. The UGB utilized psychological warfare, marking the homes of their targets with a white handprint to signal that their time was up. Their slogans were chillingly direct, such as "Be a patriot, kill a priest," as the Catholic Church became a target for its work with the poor. The face of this movement was Major Roberto D'Aubusson, a former intelligence officer who became the leader of the right-wing death squads. Known as Blowtorch Bob, D'Aubusson was linked to numerous atrocities and the orchestration of a vast network of anti-communist paramilitaries. After a failed reformist coup in 1979, the country collapsed into chaos and the death squads operated with total impunity. One man stood as a voice for the voiceless, Archbishop Oscar Romero. He pleaded with the military and the squads to stop the killing. In his final homily, he spoke directly to the soldiers, saying, "No soldier is obliged to obey an order that is contrary to the law of God." The next day, while celebrating Mass, Romero was shot through the heart by a death squad sniper. The country's hope for peace was shattered. Romero's assassination triggered a full-scale civil war, pitting the FMLN guerrillas against the US-backed Salvadoran military. During the 1980s, the violence became industrialized. It was no longer just selective, it was a strategy of mass murder. In December 1980, 5 members of the National Guard abducted, raped, and murdered 4 American churchwomen, a crime that shocked the world. Despite these horrors, the United States provided massive military aid, over $6 billion, to prevent a communist victory. The Reagan administration frequently downplayed death squad atrocities, dismissing reports of massacres as communist propaganda to ensure continued funding. In December 1981, the US trained Atlacatal Battalion slaughtered nearly 1,000 civilians in the village of El Mozote. El Mozote was not an isolated incident. It was part of a scorched earth policy designed to drain the sea from the guerrilla fish. In the cities, squads like the Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez Anti-Communist Brigade left bodies at dumping grounds like El Playón. Victims were often found with their thumbs tied behind their backs, showing the signature signs of specialized torture and execution. Declassified documents show the CIA knew that wealthy Salvadoran exiles in Miami were financing the death squads from the safety of the US. In 1989, even as the war wound down, the Atlacatal Battalion murdered 6 Jesuit priests, their housekeeper, and her daughter. This atrocity finally turned the tide of international opinion and US congressional support, forcing the government to the negotiating table. The 1992 peace accords mandated the dissolution of the death squads and the security forces that sustained them. The National Guard and Treasury Police were abolished, replaced by a new civilian police force, offering a glimmer of hope for a new era, but that hope was short-lived. In 1993, an amnesty law was passed, protecting all war criminals from prosecution for decades. This culture of impunity meant that the leaders of the death squads never faced justice, and the victims' families remained in silence. Many researchers argue that the paramilitary structures of the 80s laid the groundwork for the modern gang violence that plagues the region today. New forms of social cleansing squads have emerged, echoing the tactics of the past under the guise of fighting crime. Today, dedicated groups of families and forensic experts are still digging, searching for the remains of those who vanished into the lava fields. Preserving the memory of these atrocities is the only way to ensure that the cry of never again becomes a reality for future generations. The history of El Salvador's death squads is a burden the country still carries, a testament to the resilience of those who continue to seek the truth. Only by facing this dark past can El Salvador truly move toward a future built on the rule of law and the sanctity of human life.